First of all, can I vote in?
But you can talk to them all.
Great, great. So, hello everyone. I've had a very nice day so far. I've missed most of today, so I'm going to try and make the most of it after this session. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the processes that don't normally get documented in the course of doing a project when you're really pressed for time. It's super sort of last minute, there's a change, there's an alteration to the schedule, there's some kind of happening that you just didn't anticipate, and I thought I'd share with you some of those sort of case studies. I think it's quite reassuring sometimes to know that some of the projects that do get a lot of exposure are actually sometimes just cobbled together as well. Which I personally find reassuring if someone tells me, that project didn't quite go as we expected it to, or the finesse that it currently has took a lot of sweat and blood to get to the stage it's at. The reason why there's a brain there is that I read recently that if you put a brain in your presentation slides, people pay more attention. Well, I guess we'll know. I'm not really I'm really pressure on myself.
Do so you get in the background of each slide.
We should have done that, shouldn't I?
Just kind of like swap the brains up.
That's for the next presentation. I used to teach at the University of Huddersfield with a gentleman who's here today as well, Rob. Rob actually taught me, and then somehow I just stuck around.
I'll take all the credit.
Yes, yeah. So Rob over there still does very, very interesting digital things, and very grateful to still be associated with the university in the capacity at the company that I work at. So I found it running in the hole with my friends. We basically go by, oh yeah, this is the studio shop that makes things look really sort of cheerful and cheery. One of my friends pointed out that on our website we've got this picture. It's the only picture of us actually working, and we're not working, we're playing on the Xbox. About 4 years ago I decided to be teaching, and basically got a bit jealous of my students who were doing really interesting things and making cool stuff happen. And I thought, well, if I don't do this, then it's not going to happen. And I joined forces with my friends who, Sam already had an agency, and I just said, well, can we do other stuff as well? And Alison was doing apps. And so that's how we sort of started. One of our, I was trying to dig out some quotes before a presentation, and I found that one of our clients had said this. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to stick this into the presentation. So I actually reused this slide. It's a car manufacturer that we're sort of working with, and he basically said good design and engineering will always be desirable, and that's exactly how we've managed to get some really interesting clients, just by trying to stay committed to doing a really good job, and sometimes that's come at a really heavy cost. Some of the sort of biggest clients on there are actually the lowest paid jobs we've ever done. So we have worked on some cool projects that you see in supermarkets and stuff, but also one of the projects I'm going to talk to you about sort of falls under the sort of app development category that we work under, and we also make games and basic websites as well. But the times when I'm trying to find like a common thread when I was looking at the opportunity to do this presentation, and the common thread in most of those works is that they're all sort of held together with some form of digital duct tape, which hopefully I'll let you know a little bit about. So we do get to play with some interesting technology, but a lot of the times the things that do look interesting are actually really simple and lo-fi as well. So we started work with a product design agency doing their website, and they were asked by the Gadget Show, they're called Small Fry, they're based in Coventry, and they were asked by the Gadget Show to participate in a Gadget Show special that was all about referee-less football games. How can you sort of take the referee out of the equation? What kind of technologies can we use? And having very limited resources, we were asked to do something that initially I thought this isn't going to happen. Certainly not with 2 weeks of time. It's just ridiculous. They're asking for us to track where the players are going and whatnot. and I don't know anything about football, and I had to understand what the offside rule was, so we just sort of sat together, tried to sort of work out what was required, and in a very short span of time we knocked together a very simple demo that was literally just stuck together. You don't even see these guys, but these are little, they're like Sabutio sort of football players, but they've got capes on, so they've got colour capes, and this is hacked together using existing code, so we didn't even have to write any code to try and demo the initial thing, just like a little proof of concept to say, yes, we can do this, guys. And ultimately, on the day, there were other companies, universities, other people sort of involved, and they had like really, really fancy gear. The cameras were like £15,000 apart, and they were all sort of arranged around the goalposts to detect when the ball sort of swooshes over. And I was there with like a little old Sony PlayStation webcam. It wasn't even like a newer one, and the lighting constantly changed in that space. So this crappy little webcam, because it wasn't sensitive enough, managed to do the trick. Whereas the more expensive stuff, they're like, oh guys, we can't do this. So they actually made it part of the storyline that something happened, blah blah blah. So they got their shots, but we actually managed to get the thing to work, and that's why we got asked to do other stuff with them as well. One of those other things was something that I'll mention a little bit as well, and we managed to work with a much bigger name, not Jason Bradbury, but Stephen Fry on his sort of Gadget Man show. Don't know if anyone saw that?
Yeah.
I've got a little clip of it here, but kind of a little bit pointlessly. Oh, actually, yeah. These were actually genuine reactions, which was really nice to see. In our heads, it didn't quite, well in my head, it didn't quite go like that before it happened. So I'll let you know how we use digital duct tape there as well, so bear in mind. So there's this sort of idea and notion that you can do pretty well-managed projects if you have a system in place, but I'm sure you've worked on projects and know that it rarely sort of sticks to that. It's something more chaotic and into making stuff up as you go along a lot of the time, but you always have to give the impression to the client that everything is under control. And we found that actually it kind of works really well in our favour when we do say to the client, we don't know what's going on, or not quite sure why this is happening, but we'll find out, and these are the steps that we're taking. When we started, it wasn't quite like that. We were quite scared of telling the client, this isn't quite going to plan, but now we'll just tell them and kind of bring them on board in terms of co-creating the project with us, and they get very excited about it. And that's something that I've never had to use digital duct tape for. I don't know why this is, but trying to create very user-centric solutions, if you involve the users right at the start, and we do this a lot with nearly every project that we do now, we involve the stakeholders, the managers, and it's just another cost to sort of account for in your project, but I'd be happy doing this kind of stuff for free if it gets people very excited, and if it lubricates the wheels of getting a project underway smoothly when things might go wrong down the line. So, number one, I'm going to tell you about the Christie's project and how that came to be. It came through a tweet. A friend of mine I once did a workshop with, he retweeted us at the start of our business. Like we were a couple of months into our business, and his blog is Flowing Data. I'm sure you've seen it. Lots of lovely analysis on information visualization, and very active forums on there. And we just sent out a fairly, not very spammy tweet, but hey, we're doing apps and websites now. And he just retweeted it, very kind of him. And somebody picked up on that, contacted us about something else. That never materialized, but further down the line they contacted us again and said, we've got a fairly beefy NDA, would you guys be interested in signing it before we can tell you? And I thought, well, this is intriguing, let's go with it. And sometimes things are, when you're starting up, it's very fragile, and you think, well, do we have the skills to fulfill what they're actually asking us? And that, in my mind, is one of the scariest things. The digital duct tape version of the Christie's app. The Christie's app, we had a very sort of limited time. We didn't even have an iPad, I'm not kidding. We didn't even have an iPad when we sort of started, because the iPad had just come out about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before we got the proposal. I had to buy the iPad off a competition winner, go down to Mansfield. It was like a former student of mine who wants to buy a camera instead of his iPad, so I bought it off him. We started playing around and thought, well, this is an iPad in our hands now. We've seen other apps on the App Store. Surely we can sort of do this as well. Little did we know how complex it was going to be to work with 30, 40 different ways of querying a feed, and lots of assets, and genuinely hadn't done a big iOS app of that scale before. The first thing we've done was basically a game that's still in the App Store and it's doing well. So the first version, genuinely wasn't the most optimized version, but it works crash-free. That's a good thing. If you're sort of presenting to a client that it works, then that's perfect. But we just knew that, we cannot sustain that. So this happened. This is kind of a cautionary tale that you can't always use digital duct tape, really. So before I begin telling you about some of the other instances, I need to say that there are some things that you can't just sort of make do with. If it's an enterprise sort of grade project that thousands of people are going to be using, you really do need to skill up, so to speak, and manage to pull off better next time. So we spent a little bit of time extra on the next sort of work order. Thankfully, we were still, we delivered, so we were still the delivery partner on the rest of the project. And it was really nice to have a more sort of fluid version of the app sort of working. Turned into a very long-term engagement for us, and obviously the name brought us other business as well. Got featured by Apple, and it was really lovely. But I think the takeaway from that is that it's really good to be so scared at times. But when you finally sort of look at the product that you delivered and you think there's something that you could do better, then you really should try and sort of start from scratch if possible. Number two, this takes me back to when I was a student, and I found that the university had basically invested in a brainwave reader. I mean, it sounds futuristic, doesn't it? Brainwave reader. I mean, you can get NeuroSky EEG devices now fairly cheaply, but I think this was bought to some silly money, and I just thought, why is it sitting there on a shelf? I'd really love to use this, but I didn't know how. I was trying to sort of wedge this sort of idea of things that break and glitches into some kind of format that would then use the brainwave reader. not the right way to do things, but I got so interested in glitches that I ended up co-authoring a book with a couple of other people and just listing lots of images and works from people who were playing around with making things break and producing interesting visual output with it. So that was that was a strand in itself. But this is what I actually made for my final year project. This doesn't have any sound, and I used like a really old crappy Nikon at the time to film it. So it's like 12 frames a second or something. It was called Neuromove, and the idea was that you'd wear this brainwave reader around your head, and the more calm you became, the mirror image of you became more distorted. So I'm clearly not calm there, or I'm trying to be. I can't even remember, it's that long ago. But the way I used, I basically had to use the spectral analysis software that didn't come with the brainwave reader, and that was probably the reason why nobody had used it before. So I had to find something that could do that and write to a text file so I could then read that in and do something interesting with it. So in order to do that, I had to look around, and the only thing that I found was a bit of software that they'd used just for eye candy in the film Contact. Has anyone seen that film? That's actually one of my favourite films. But this little sort of spectral analysis software, it kind of created a 3D diagram of what was the histogram of what was going on. And I thought that's quite interesting, and it had interesting sort of hooks into that data as well. But the machine that I had just wasn't powerful enough to be able to isolate that particular frequency that I wanted using the audio feed from the brainwave reader. So a friend suggested, why don't you use my guitar pedal, my little effects delay? So I spent hours and hours, must have spent a whole day trying to tweak it just to the right point that I could detect the sort of very signature like alpha waves that the system was picking up. I later found out that actually that brainwave reader was pretty crap. It wasn't really alpha waves. It was when you close your eyes, your brain's supposed to produce a burst of sort of alpha waves. But what really was happening when you close your eyes, it produced bursts of EKG signals, and that's what was picking it up. But it worked conceptually for the project, and this guitar delay basically saved this. So that's my other digital duct tape. And number 3. We were asked to do something much, much bigger and grander and involving several other partners, the Battlefield simulator for the Gadget Show. So EA got involved naturally because this game hadn't come out yet. And the reason why they involved us was ironically because we produced kind of duct tape together solutions that the solutions weren't necessarily the highest end. They wanted to make it more sort of accessible and more DIY. Still flattered to be asked, but not for quite the right reasons. And this is it. I mean, this is how they made it look really cool, and this is how they got a lot of viewers. So I don't know if we can hear the audio as well. Hopefully we can hear as well. So he was getting shot with paintball, sort of rubber paintballs. Which was pretty fun. And genuinely, it was one of the most interesting sort of gaming things that I tried. We were asked to do the Connect portion, because Connect's so abundantly available, where if you crouched or if you jumped, it would detect that. And there's a really nice sort of clip of that on the show as well. Working. Here's the bit that they didn't quite show because they were potentially embarrassed a little bit. Even though they'd asked us to do like a very lo-fi thing, they were a bit embarrassed that it was that lo-fi. So I used an Arduino in this sort of project. We had one of our contacts who was a student at the university, and you know, he basically James Dyer. I don't know if he's in today or no, he's not. Shame. But he basically could sort of program an Arduino pretty handily, and we sort of were responsible for liaising with the rest of the teams to ensure that what we're making would actually work. But at the end of the day, we were trying to go for the lowest sort of common denominator type technology that you can instantly replace if something went wrong. So that's why we chose an Arduino and an inconspicuous little server. How did we get the interface from the Kinect to go to the computer, you might ask? Well, here is the ingenious solution. Don't laugh, this works. I had to provide an HTC desire to get this footage off it.
You should put a manual automatic system.
Sorry?
A manual automatic system.
Yes, it is. It truly is. And the reason for this, I mean, obviously, we know that you can use various sort of protocols to communicate from games. I mean, I've played around with Unreal Tournament, some of my colleagues have as well, and I know that you can use UDP packets to send control data. You can send this game state to another sort of client, but Battlefield wasn't out yet, so they had like a secure, special delivery system to give us this precious demo that didn't even work on the machine. I mean, you had to compile this in order to get it to work on your machine. So I have the source file somewhere, which was incredible. I mean, 17 gigabytes. It was just one little thing, but it didn't work. So we didn't even have the game to test it with. So I tested it with Battlefield 2, which is just the same really, they've just repackaged it, haven't they?
Yeah, a lot of people that work remotely will have something like that going, so you can actually pretend to be working.
Don't sort of Warcraft sort of gold farmers, don't they have like a system like that? Maybe there's a way of like having like a mechanical keyboard sort of array set up.
Just get a bunch of those dippy duct things.
Oh yeah, there you go. Lots of great ideas. I think this is what I was hoping for, the more interesting solutions we've come around. This is a small bit of digital duct tape. This was actually extremely professionally done, the project. We thought, well, we've got more time, and this time, for the first time, we're getting paid for doing a TV thing. So we thought, okay, we need to cut down on the lo-finess and try and do this really properly. So my colleague Sam used Node.js, Alison used Unity, so that we have all those lovely sort of effects of the building crumbling. And this, I don't know what this projector sort of has, but it's probably like 1,000 lumens or something. But that's you could tan in front of the projector array that they'd set up. And it was next to London City Airport as well, so we didn't realise this, but you have to get permission, especially on foggy evenings, before you can start projecting stuff. Otherwise, the air authority gets very, very angry. But in addition to that, the thing that I think really sort of added to the experience were the sort of sounds of explosions. Something that we thought of just in the sort of last sort of day of testing. We thought, this just isn't sort of working. So. And we were in the middle of this is pretty crazy. We were in the middle of another project, and we thought, well, we can't tell the client that we're down there having fun. So we actually invited the client to sort of come down as well, just to have a play on this. And he was more than happy to sort of help and be there to test stuff. But the sort of task that we gave Oliver as well was actually to play with the soundboard. So we had a soundboard loaded up with loads of explosions, and it just added, there's a little bit of digital duct tape to make it work in a bit more sort of human fashion. So if you had lots of sort of explosions happening, you could go with the more sort of explosive sound. And if we sort of tried to program that extra step, it would have just taken us away from actually finishing the project. So some of the things that are enabled with digital duct tape are very low-fi solutions, but they really make all the difference. So we spent a lot of the time on the project just trying to scout for locations and came up with different game modes. We programmed lots of affordance into the system. So digital duct tape is sometimes just making the system as extremely sort of adaptable to the different scenarios that it could sort of possibly encounter. So for example, if the building was larger, we had this script set up so that it would just add some more sort of windows and rows to the array, and then we could do sort of manual adjustment as well for the width. And that's what it looked like. There's some really nice shots of the building. So the key takeaway from all that is that what makes all those sort of projects memorable for me personally is that coming up with those little hacky solutions was the most fun part. The parts that weren't fun were writing the contracts, speaking to the legal teams, all of that. All of those things I'd gladly forget. But the things that I do remember and I can tell people about in terms of the story are the sort of interesting little hacky things. And the analog things as well. A lot of the things I've just shown you are very sort of analog and clicky. We work in the space of libraries, and by far, and we talk to lots and lots of library systems vendors about the gamification platform that will create a library game. And by far the most interesting discovery system that I've ever encountered is in Huddersfield Town Library, and I've been to loads of libraries around the world, not just here. And it's just arranging the fiction books by, the spine colour, and I'm sure if somebody actually measured the analytics, they, because I see people sort of in there frequently using this section, it just offers a more interesting way to browse, a more sort of serendipitous way to browse things. So yes, digital duct tape, build affordances, hack things that are very low-fi, use analog things as much as possible. That's my presentation. Please like this on running and on Facebook, because it's quite a cultural number of likes on there at the moment. That's it.